Just standing for a moment, feet hip width apart. If you're watching this and you've not done this before, everything comes from the basic posture. So just keep referring back to it, build it up slowly and gently. If we're more used to it, remember your weight slightly forward, softening in your knees, getting that feeling of sitting. It reminds me a little bit of the feeling I get if I'm out for a walk and my legs are tired or something like that, and I just lean back against a fence or sort of just on the edge of a wall for a few moments. Like, oh, that's nice, and just that sense of releasing all the way through your body. Think of your pelvis and hips level, the shoulders level, and your head just sitting on your shoulders rather than straining in your neck to hold your head up, and then just start to turn in the middle of your body, hips and waist, feeling the movement go up in the chest and the back, and then into your shoulders. Letting your body settle into a nice steady rhythm. Which it will do if you just give it time. Notice any areas that feel a bit stiff or tight, and remember it's quite warm at the moment, and so take that into account. Remember to take liquids in and realize that you can be a bit sluggish. We know, we kind of recognize that in the colder weather we're going to be a bit stiffer. It takes a little while to loosen up. The same thing really applies in the hot weather. Circulation gets a bit sluggish. Joints swell up a little bit and things. And as we start to move and our blood starts to flow more freely, the energy in the body starts to flow more freely. That is actually a way in which heat is dispersed through the body and even leaves the body. So just as important to do that, what is referred to as the warm-up. I think warm-up is a bit of a misnomer. It does raise your body temperature a little bit, which helps the circulation and things. But it's better to think of sort of preparing for the main exercise. Making sure that areas that are a bit stiff or a bit tight at least are recognized, maybe dispersing, dissolving a little bit. That might happen quite quickly with some areas, depends why the blockage is there. But in general, those areas that are a bit tight, we want to move around them very carefully rather than push into them. And we can only do that properly if we're really aware of what we're doing. Your arms swing round, feeling quite heavy. Your hands, if you could see where my hands are falling, more or less the same place each time. Same as from behind. So the back of my wrist strikes across the base of the spine. Not because I'm trying to put it there, but simply because actually that's where, if I do this with a little bit of momentum for the arm, that's generally where it will end up. And then hips dropping back still, your arms coming up slightly in front of your shoulders, open across your back and chest. Elbows hanging down. So rather than feeling that you have to sort of strain to hold your arms up, it's almost like your arms are being held up, like if you were still, with a cord from the ceiling just around your wrist, you'd be letting your arms rest. And then just letting your hands drop down. And in general, we look for that softer quality in our body. The last exercise is a good example of that. What we often do when I come close, I lift my arms, we do this, you see my shoulders come up, I'm straining and stiffening. But I can let my shoulder drop down, see how my elbow drops. It's still quite strong, but the muscles in my arms are just, they're full and they're working, but they're not unstrained. And this is something that we want to try and reproduce all the way through the body. One of the really important elements of that is to allow your center of gravity to drop. So our hips have dropped back a little bit, let them drop down a little bit more. The sitting develops, and then feel your legs pushing you up. And then gravity takes over and draws your hips down. And again, you feel that movement pushing up through your upper body, and bring your hands around as though you're cradling the ball. And let your legs push your hands up, your elbows out. Your hands will just come up a little bit, and then as though you're pressing the ball down into water. So the main thing with this exercise in the first few rounds is just to feel this sense of allowing your center of gravity to drop, to root down. And as you get more experience with this, you'll fairly quickly feel that you reach a tipping point at each end of the movement. Down here, the sort of pressure builds up in your legs until you come up. And here, the pull of gravity takes over and pull down. So it's like being in water, dropping down into water, or pushing a ball down into water, and the buoyancy of the water pushes you up. And then eventually you're going to drop down again, and so on and so forth. Nice smooth rhythm and flow. Developing out of that. Always looking to feel that your body has support. Your body has support from your legs, of course. And things we're standing on, legs and feet, and the ground beneath them. But also we have this inner quality, which includes our skeleton, but this sort of stronger, denser feeling within our body. Think of a tailor's dummy or mannequin in a shop window with the garment draped around it. That inner strength is like the mannequin, and the soft tissue of your body, including your arms, and indeed the bones of your arms, are really the garment. This time, as you sink down, turn your hands out, and the wild goose. The image of the bird in flight is a helpful one if it conveys some kind of quality without distracting you. Then the image can help to just encourage that quality in our movements. With your arms out to the sides, you may quite quickly feel that there's a stiffening up there. Don't worry about that. The next exercise will probably help to release that. So this time, going into the exercise part in the clouds, let your hands drop down and cross and push up, circling around, nice and expansive without straining for a stretch. So it's not always realized, I think, the degree to which Tai Chi conditions our body. What we don't do necessarily is sort of focus on particular muscles and pull weights and so on and so forth. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it just doesn't really come into Tai Chi initially, at least. But rather conditioning of the whole of our body, muscles, tendons, ligaments, even sort of bones and perhaps even the fascia, the quality of the movement, that inner strength starting to just gently pervade the whole of our body. So that's not going to happen overnight. Be prepared to rest a little bit, but realize that actually the way that we stand, the way that we move in Tai Chi requires a slightly different conditioning to a lot of other activities. Now changing, as you push up this time, one arm pushing up, just dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Little rotation and draw down. Like you're plucking a berry off a tree. Changing sides slowly. So one of the analogies, one of the images we often use in Tai Chi is that we're moving through water. And in many ways that's appropriate. When we move in water, we tend not to stiffen up, or at least if we do, we learn to just soften in the joints of the body, not to strain against the water, but to move with it. What we're learning to do is to move with the patterns of movement, the pull of gravity, the push up from the ground, the various patterns of movement within our body that develop, not straining against them, even if they're things that we don't particularly wish to develop. So I just trying to make sure my hands don't disappear. But even so, if you push hard against something, it's like if you push hard against water, the resistance increases. And really what we're trying to do is to do the opposite. We're trying to encourage this process of softening and releasing of tightness rather than add to it. Do one more of these. Let your hips drop back a little bit, not too much. Bring your hands to your side. So now pushing in 4 directions. First direction is up, hands going a little bit above your head, just slightly in front of your shoulders. And then back down to the starting position. Push out and turn just a little bit in your hips. Hands going straight out from your shoulders and back. And away, turning no further than a point where you can still feel that elasticity within your body. Push out to the sides. So between the physical side of the art postures and the movements and the meditational element, the bringing our attention into our body to notice these different aspects. A feeling fields that I would describe as spacious, less crowded by our thoughts. Less tightness in our body. And within that space, that's when we get the feeling of the movement, the energy, just beginning to flow in a less sort of fractured way, smoother, more fluid, more harmonious, less restricted. So if I turn and I go to here, I could hold this posture if I wanted to, but if I go to here, now it's tightening up. So our awareness and our discernment about how far to move, how to move, is one of the things that gradually develops as a sort of skill. And it's one of the skills that I think we learn to take with us into our daily lives in Tai Chi. Take your time. At the end of each stage, there's this slight kind of what we might interpret as a pause. We don't rush back. We don't rush to push out. I like to think of those points as being like a punctuation, like a comma in a sentence. Not really a pause, it doesn't just stop abruptly, but it sort of just helps to structure it. And being aware of that is really one of the things that I think helps with this quieter quality in our minds as well as our bodies. Last time. And then hands drop down. This time on the expansion, just let that push one arm out to the side and feel how it curves up. It's in line with your nose and then straight down. You could imagine you're standing in the doorway of an old church and the sort of the arch of the door frame around you, just sliding the palm of your hand around that frame. What I'm showing is the sort of maximum range of movement. If it's at all uncomfortable, if you get your hand this far, then do less, that's fine. That goes for all of the movements. And then this time, if it's comfortable, once again, you turn. If you find that the turn tightens up in the hip or your back or your shoulders or whatever, just stay with the original exercise. Don't do the turn just yet. Or at least just make it a smaller turn, perhaps. Now, changing sides. Notice any difference between one side and another. Just try and observe what's happening in your back, your belly, your chest, these echoes of the movement that we feel within the body. Again, if it's comfortable, add in the turn. And remember, those movements will eventually come to be viewed as being like the building blocks of the bigger movements. Like the individual bricks that make up a wall. Now, letting your arms rest. Go back to this exercise. I said when we were doing this, shoulders, so hips and pelvis are level, shoulders are level, your head just resting on top of your shoulders. We're going to change that this time. As you sink down, deliberately push your hips back so your pelvis tilts, taking your shoulders and your head forward. It doesn't have to be a long way. I'm showing this quite big so you can see what I'm doing. And then hips and tail of your spine, drop back, and you come into the upright position and push up. And then again, and push So we come to the upright position with a lot less strain, a lot more openness, and this time let your arms follow. Just be careful of your knees and your hips. As you go forwards, your shoulders go forwards. Extend your hands out in front, and then hips dropping back, bringing your head and your shoulders up gently, and then again. This is rowing a boat in the middle of the lake. This way of coming to an upright position is very characteristic of Tai Chi. And what you want to do is just allow that to open up the space within your upper body. You're not having to strain in our shoulders or our neck or our back, just to be upright. And then hands in front of your hips and turn slightly and then push your shoulders, your hips back. So how that pushes your hands forwards, swing around, and then come back to the upright position. Do the same thing in the other directions, just polishing the table. Remember, I'm trying to do these movements quite big. Just feel what's going on in your knees, your back. It's quite fine to do smaller movements. You can just do this, that's fine. Sometimes we get more out of doing a movement smaller because we notice more. Those small movements within the body are less covered up. So we could do either, move between the two in our own practice. Polishing the table. Do one more. And then just stand. So this is why we use the phrase sometimes that small movements are better than big movements. It's not that we're not interested in the big movements. It's more because we don't want you to stretch. If I stretch my arm out like that, I can stretch, I can do all sorts of things. They're all useful things to do. But think about a tree. A tree pushes the branch out. When it grows out of the trunk. And so we're looking for that sense of the whole body moving. And when body and mind can work together in that way, once again, that's when we start to get the flow of the energy working through the body. And it's perfectly reasonable to want to have bigger movements to extend your range of movement, but actually it's going to be more sustainable if you work from inside out rather than from outside in. So let's go back to standing again for a few moments and just re-establish your posture. And shake out. Okay. Go to a slightly wider stance. Transferring your weight across from one side to another. And then across and turning. Careful you don't collapse that knee in. Go across to the other side and turn. Now, part the wild horse's mane. Go into your right foot, right hand on top of the ball, left hand underneath, move across, and as you turn, at that swing, expanding into your left side, coming back, hold the ball, and then move back into your left. Turn slightly. When you turn, it's like you're winding up a spring very gently around your spine and the center line of your body. So as we move across, there's a release because of the weight moving from one leg to another, but also because of the release of that springiness in your upper body. It's really all the same thing. I'm just describing the different sides, the different aspects of the same movement. So we go across into the left. Take your time. Feel that both your leg and that winding up movement are loading until the release. Don't overload, of course. One more to the right. And we're going to change to the exercise, white ape offers fruit. So start in the same way. Go into your right foot, depart in the wild horse's mane. Notice how the chest opens up. This time, don't move your weight, but still release that spring in the center of the body. So you turn slightly, the chest contracts, brings your right hand towards your left elbow. Now use your left leg. So your fingers of your right hand are stuck in mud. You pull the fingers out of the mud, settle down in your right leg, turn towards the left hand. Turn your hands in so you're holding a peach or soft fruit and move the weight. Change sides, come across into your right foot. At the right hand, the leading hand, continue until it's holding the bottom of the ball. Come across into your left, turn and load the body, releasing to part the wild horse's mane. Chest open, loading into the leg and just turning slightly, but don't move the weight. Left hand comes to the right elbow, pull the fingers out of the mud, turn, facing to the right, and push in. White ape offers fruit. Easy and gently. Just take your time. Those moments of settling in to each leg are the times when we can just let our attention quieten a little bit. We can often get, when we're doing a movement like this, you can often get a bit frantic. Oh, I'm not sure which hand. Rest in the left leg. Turn a bit. Oh, it's the leading hand. Hold the ball. Move across. It's not a race. And so we start to learn to use an awareness of things like settling our weight into the leg to help us to quieten down, to get that sense of the stillness within the movement. White Tape offers free. Fixed step version. There's versions where you can turn more, move the feet. There's also a version where you can do the stepping. At the moment, just keeping it fixed step. One more time on each side. And shake out. So Tai Chi can help us to develop a less rushed feeling when we're doing things. This has nothing to do with the speed. Well, it's not true. We cultivate it originally by going slowly, but there's a difference between going fast and rushing, and quite often we can get quite frantic. You know, if you've had a busy weekend, for instance, you might be still thinking about that busy weekend. Oh, I didn't do this, or I needed to do that, or you know, if you've got a few things to do, a busy week comes, I've got to do this, got to do that, and it's like our minds are kind of busy. If we can learn to bring our attention back into our bodies and realize that it's not going to stay there, it's not going to be like that permanently, because we will get well, I won't even call it a distraction. These things are important in our lives, so they're not a distraction. It's just not something to consider now. So, you know, and if you think about it, something like white tape can be quite complicated, and sometimes we can feel thinking about something so hard that actually we lose the response. Like those times in a conversation when you're talking to somebody, you're talking about somebody else, and you say, yeah, and you can't quite remember their name, and it's on the tip of your tongue, and no matter how hard you try, you can't quite bring it to the surface. And then you carry on talking, you say a few words or a sentence, and suddenly it just arises. It's like, yeah, Paul, that was his name. That was it. You have to say it really quickly, because if you try too hard, then you're going to kind of push it down again. And this also relates, I think, to this idea of moving in water. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not brilliant when I'm in water, but I know enough now to know that when I get those, oh, what's going on? The waves pushing me about. Actually, I need to just quieten down. So it works on many different levels, or mentally, physically, energetically. So you know, we learn. I was emphasising it a little bit today, but really, in the end, that only takes moments to just break the cycle of rushing. And again, I think this is a really, really useful sort of life skill. With my first teacher, Bronwyn Hipkin, always used to say that, you know, with this posture, that we'd find ourselves standing like this in the supermarket queue. And exactly what happened to me. And I'm sure we've all been there. You know, you just popped in to get a loaf of bread, and a long queue, and the machines aren't working. Like, come on, I've got to get home. And you know, you're looking at your watch, and it doesn't help. If there is a solution, you're more likely to get it from that point of a kind of still, calm awareness. Not talking about just necessarily accepting the situation, but it's like, oh, what do I want to do? So, oh, with that quietness, you can maybe see a way through, or you think, oh, actually, I've still got a few minutes, perhaps, or you know, maybe I'll go to another shop, or yeah, that I don't know, that kind of thing. So changing the stance. Have one foot forward. Keep the width of your step about the same in length. A really useful reference point for that quietening comes each time we transfer the weight. In terms of the Tai Chi movements, and particularly the more complex ones, this is often quite definitive. If we can just take a moment to settle our weight properly, then we can often find the next movement. And frankly, even if you don't, you've still done the correct thing by settling in. because that will actually help you to absorb what comes next. So you move the weight, and excuse me a moment. One thing you can do to help this process is you say bring your weight into your front leg, rest there, and imagine you can breathe up through your leg. We know we can't, but imagine you can breathe up through your leg, breathe out with a sighing breath, and maybe just sort of see if you can release a little bit in your knee and your hip, and then go back into your back leg. Do the same thing, breathe in, breathe out. And sometimes when you do that, particularly under the rest in this, the out breath, you can feel there's the beginning of a push, almost like you're in the sea again, and you can feel the waves starting to build. So rather than thinking, like, is it time to push back? Sometimes you can just sense when to go with the push, and you take it forwards and backwards rather than up. You don't do it like that all the time. If you can recognize that quality, you'll find that actually it's a very momentary thing. It takes hardly any time at all, but it's worth spending some time on it to help you to recognize that, and to recognize and to cultivate the whole process. And then just raising your toes and your heel. And as you do this, more of your weight goes into the supporting leg. So this happens actually at that moment when we're settling our weight. So it's not that nothing happens there in the end. And again, not rushing. It's very easy to get into this. If you find yourself doing that, don't sort of think you've somehow failed. It's very, very good. It's very common. I think everybody does it. But gradually letting more of your weight settle into your leg, getting a sense for the alignment of your body over that leg, and then stepping in. So your leg contracts, and if it's your front leg that you're stepping with, you push out, you put your heel down, lower your toes. Notice my foot is at a slight angle now. I go forward, push my back knee forward, settle into front leg, contract the back leg, expand, put the ball of my foot down, then the heel, and then I move. So as much as possible, I want my pelvis to remain level. I bring my foot in. If I do this, then I'm already starting to wobble around. Shake out. Have your other foot forwards. Transferring your weight. So you can see actually that process of settling in, the punctuation that I described, is also it's not a stopping, and it's not that you're not doing anything, but you're changing what you're doing. What you're wanting to do here is here you're moving the weight. Here you're thinking about your posture, maybe taking that breath in, releasing, and that will help your posture, and so on and so forth. Both are important. I'm not saying that one is less important than another, and they're two sides of the same thing. So whenever we focus on one particular aspect of Tai Chi, that's always a useful thing to do. But remember that the ultimate goal of Tai Chi is that it's integrated. Body, mind, and energy working together as one unit. And we might identify areas that maybe we want to work on, and that's when we'd focus on one particular thing. but ultimately we're looking for the complete movement. Raising your toes and your heel. And then stepping in. Plant the foot. And again, that means when we practice just this single exercise, we can take a little bit more time. If you plant something in your garden, you don't just kind of throw it out. Oh, that'll be all right. You choose where to put it. You push it into the ground in one way or another. You place your foot, maybe apply a little bit of pressure, just feel the ground beneath your feet. And then step through. So an awareness of our posture and our movement gives us a quiet space for our attention, for our thoughts to rest. Change direction if you haven't done so already. And that quieter attention has more space, more awareness of what's going on in our body. And you can begin to work more creatively with your posture. And between them, those two processes help to create the environment within which, once again, our energy will flow more. Check out. Have your right foot forwards. Starting in your back foot, rest your hands on your belly. Push forward, let the movement push your elbows out and see how that draws your hands forwards. And eventually, the body expands, separating your fingers, opening the chest again, and then drawing back. So the primary movement, the primary energy comes from the transfer of your weight forwards and then backwards. And then forwards and back. Once we've established that, then we can begin to observe what's happening in the upper part of our body. Here, as I go forward, there's an opening, an expansion across my chest. Eventually, it's going to contract, and that helps to bring my hands in. And as that happens, I feel a similar opening across my back. So it's not just the movement of the weight, there's this pulsing rhythm through the upper part of my body. Pigeon spreads its wings is the name of the movement, of course. Good. And shake out. You may notice the movements elsewhere. I mean, you may notice, think, well, hold on, I can feel it in my side. That's fine. It comes out of what we observe, and we will all observe slightly differently. Over a period of time, if you keep practicing these exercises, you'll be able to work out which of those movements are useful to you. And remember, these small changes in the body are the movements that are most likely to be affected in one way or another by our intent. And so we can think, well, actually, I'm doing this on that movement, and it's doesn't seem to fit. So I'll just try not to do it. I'll find a way to reduce that and to maybe cultivate a different aspect of the movement. So have your left foot forwards, hands on your belly, and then pigeon spreads its wings. We cultivate, just as you might, if you've got a rose bush in your garden, you want it to go a particular way, you might look at it and you think, well, I'll cut that branch and spread that one out a bit, and so on and so forth. Again, as you develop in these exercises, your own awareness becomes a really important guide. One more time. And shake. And once again, this helps us develop all of the movements. We're going to do fisherman cast a net, but when I go forwards here in this position, I notice certain features within the body, certain areas of expansion and contraction. Of course, my weight is moving, but then if I want to make the change to wind blows the willows, for instance, I feel the expansion and then I turn, and it's the same expansion, building the same expansion, the expansion from the sides. And all I've done is one thing. I haven't gone from this and suddenly gone, oh, now I've got to flap my arms around. Here, as I get to here, as I turn, I let the turn separate my hands and I come into position here. Obviously, it's helpful if you've got an idea of the exercise, but one little change, the turning of the center, can be the thing that initiates the movement into a very different exercise. So have your right foot forwards and then go into fisherman cast a net. Time go forwards, turn to your right, wind blows the willows. And turn the front foot out a little bit, and then so as you turn again, let the back knee come forwards, bring the foot in, step out again, plant the foot. Remember, pelvis and hips, shoulders level, which means you may find if you feel uncomfortable don't do this, you just raise the foot. Be careful as you do, raising and the rotation in your hip. Very easy for it to throw your posture out like that. And if you're feeling wobbly and a bit nervous perhaps, which is quite reasonable, of course, then either don't do it or maybe just do it like this. Just have your hand on the wall. You can try this at home. just to give you that little bit of extra confidence, finding out how that inner strength of your body can work in your favor. And then bring your feet parallel. Even if you feel that, oh, I'm okay with this, sometimes it's worth getting here and thinking, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. So it's not just a matter if you don't have the confidence, but if you don't, think of it as being a bit like sort of holding onto the bar in the swimming pool to get used to the buoyancy of the water. We're discovering the potential for strength, stability within our own bodies. And having discovered it, again, there is the conditioning process that goes through. So this is an ongoing thing. Left foot forward. So fisherman cast a net. Next time you go forwards, turn in, wind blows the willows. Expanding, feeling the expansion coming up from your foot, pushing your arms out. And then turning, let your back heel rise, bring the foot in. This way to start off with, then go straight into the lifting. Use that sense of being on one leg comfortably. And then you step through, dragonfly skims the water, hips dropping back. So whether you're lifting your foot up or not, if you watch a dragonfly, some dragonflies anyway, they'll sort of hover in the air for a moment, often change direction at that point. There's that slight sense of hovering. Change direction this time if you haven't done so already. Planting your foot. Dragonfly skims the water. One more time. And rub your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Your arm. The other side. Once your back. Around your hips. And your legs. Light on your belly, the upper part of your chest. And then the final exercise brings us back to that original posture, our starting and our finishing point. So sinking down, 4 stages: push up, expanding, and then feeling the pull on your hips, transmitted through your back to your hands, drawing them in and sinking down. As your hands come in to begin with, it's like they're holding the ball against your chest, and then gradually your elbows drop, and then inside here. Already I can feel the pull on my hips, the yielding movement, and finally I just allow myself to settle down. Coming back to this posture and the qualities of it, the stillness within the movement, this image of the mountain, quieter, stronger quality. Just one more time. And stand. And shake. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody.